A single Chinese spy with the alias of Robin Zhang has been using fake LinkedIn profiles to try to lure thousands of British officials into handing over state secrets in exchange for money and lucrative business deals. The intelligence officer created a string of aliases and fake companies and targeted security officials, civil servants, scientists and academics with access to classified information or commercially sensitive technologies, thought to be the most prolific spy on British territory. Let's talk about this with Ian Williams. He's author of The Fire of the Dragon, China's New Cold War. Good morning to you, Ian.
Good morning, Julia.
Thank you for joining us. I mean, this is extraordinary. It's rather less sort of glamorous, isn't it, than, you know, the John le Carré novel and the sort of meetings at night. No, this is a guy who's just sitting there on LinkedIn, sitting online on his computer, creating these aliases, these companies and targeting people. But I think what people find fascinating is not just targeting people who work for MI5 or GCHQ, targeting academics, scientists, but people who have access to what could be important information for the Chinese government.
Yeah, this is the one face of the new espionage. You think about spies hiding behind trees, fedora hats, all sorts of cliches, but this is a single person at a desk, presumably in Beijing or Shanghai, creating numerous fake identities, fake companies, and approaching hundreds, if not thousands of people in an effort to link with them, to learn about their networks, to obtain sometimes quite innocuous information, but at other extremes to try and recruit them, to try and lure them to China with the promise of speaking opportunities or participation at phantom conferences of no academic value, but paying lots of money. LinkedIn, it's wonderful for us if we're looking for professional opportunities. It's wonderful for recruiters, but it's also an enormous fishing ground, an enormous playground for espionage, for spies at really very little cost, very little effort.
It's just they're just sitting there. That information is there. What I'm fascinated by is you say some of the information will be quite innocuous. Some of it will probably be available on company websites, but when they're contacting sort of academics and scientists, and we know that academia is now awash with Chinese money, and I've been concerned about this for a long time, and I know an awful lot of politicians have been as well. So when they say, you know, look, why don't you come on this trip to China, or you know, a lovely conference in the Bahamas and all expenses paid, people perhaps won't feel that they are being bought up by the Chinese government, but are they accidentally, innocuously handing over information, or are they doing it knowingly and in return for, oh, okay, I get that free holiday for the family?
I think,
how open is it?
I think it's a combination of those things. They play to the enormous naivety and greed. And yes, you're right, academia in this country and business circles to some extent have been well and truly compromised by Chinese money, an approach which will flatter them, which will talk about the importance of the work they're doing in a field which just happens to have multiple applications, some of which are in security or in military. And yes, you know, we can offer you thousands of pounds worth of funds to come and talk at this conference. A lot of these conferences will be in China. They'll be of no academic value. It will boost the bank account of said academic, but it will also compromise them thoroughly. There may be an attempt to recruit them, but it may be simpler than that. It may be just to win their sympathy.
But also we've seen, haven't we, you know, a lack of willingness to by politicians and by academia and scientists. Don't criticise, you know, something the Chinese government has done. Even that, I think this even came out during COVID. Like, you know, let's not blame the Chinese government for, you know, if the COVID could have come from the Wuhan lab, which seems like a very likely scenario to me, because an awful lot of our funding in, you know, the new university campus building is being paid for by the Chinese, etc. And we see this again, and we see this with Middle Eastern potentates as well. But look, last month there was a report by Parliament's Intelligence and Security Committee, and this isn't just a bunch of no-mark MPs, with all due respect to politicians. These are senior former ministers largely, and they said that China had penetrated, in their words, every sector of the economy, and even attempted to place one of their assets into Britain's security services. There was actually a security alert from the MI5 to MPs about someone working closely with a Labour MP. How dangerous is this for us, given that China is. I know we do lots of trade with them, and I know we roll out red carpets for them. They come, over for things like the Queen's funeral. They are a hostile state, and many people predict that we will be at war with them. The West will be at war with them at some point in the next 10, 20 years. I mean, how dangerous is this?
It's very dangerous. That report you mentioned was possibly the most damning indictment of government policy that there has been in years. It was thoroughly critical of, as far as it was even able to identify a government policy. And yes, hostile state, but just this week we learned that the Foreign Office is letting it be known, or it's been leaked from the Foreign Office, that diplomats and civil servants there must not refer to China as a hostile state or a hostile actor out of fear of upsetting Beijing, because we want to improve our relations. James Cleverly, the foreign secretary, is supposedly off there within the next month. This notion that it can be business, investment, trade as usual, even though China does not hesitate to weaponize all three of those, has done, does, and will continue to do so. There is still enormous naivety, and it is very much summed up by what we've learned about LinkedIn.
Absolutely.
2 years ago, Julia, MI5 launched this campaign, Think Before You Link. And where's that got us?
Exactly. Ian Williams, absolutely fascinating to talk to you. It's a fascinating story. Author of The Fire of the Dragon, China's New Cold War.